Hi, welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health here on YouTube. This episode is with Shane, and he suffers from misophonia, and he's written about it. He does some podcasting and stuff too. He's a busy dude, but misophonia, that's where you basically you go into flight because of certain sounds in your environment, and he talks about how it's really affected his mental health and his relationships and all types of stuff. So without further ado, I give you Shane.
So I've had mental health issues. That sounds kind of harsh. I've had depression and anxiety since I was a teenager. And, back then, not to date myself or to age myself, but back then it was like, do not say to anyone you're going to see a shrink or you're depressed because people think you're crazy. From the 90s all the way up till maybe 6-7 years ago, I saw it progress where it was getting better and better and people were able to talk about it. And then I moved to London in 2017 and I got into, then I found out about Defeat Depression, which is an organization funded by the Mood Disorders Association of Canada. They do a yearly walk here in London, and I started to volunteer with them, just doing little minor things within the committee. And that kind of and then, COVID happened and I got into, my background was in radio. So I went to broadcasting school. I love radio. I used to do radio podcasts with Alan Cross and Michael Hainsworth called Geeks and Beats. So I was in and around broadcasting from 2014 to 2019, got laid off. And then I was lost and I didn't really know what to do. So I was listening to all these wrestling podcasts and different podcasts, and I was like, I could do so much better than them. I was like, you know what? I should do better than them. And I came up with this idea of doing this one show called Shower for the Soul, which is like a talk show just like yours, battling different issues about depression and anxiety and stuff. But this is before my misophonia. This is when fall 2019 going into 20. So I was talking about depression and anxiety and back to school and, things like that. I had Erin Davis, who was a big radio announcer in Canada. She dropped a book about her daughter passing away. So I had her on the show. And then then COVID happened. And we started talking a lot about the COVID thing. But answering your question, through Defeat Depression and through that, I just thought it was just something else needed that someone can speak up to. I remember talking to my dad and us saying that, you should get our head checked as much as we get the rest of our body checked, where OHIP could pay for a yearly consultation with a therapist as part of our yearly checkup or full body exam. And I was like, you know what? It should be regular that we can talk to people and say, hey, I'm going to a therapist tomorrow. Do you want to link up after? Just like you say, I'm going to get my head shaved tomorrow. Do you want to link up after?
Mm-hmm.
So I thought with the podcast, I'll bring more awareness to it and just let it be more casual. My talk show was more casual, where we would be able to be open and talk about issues that 5-6 years ago, it was kind of like.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't realize you had a podcast as well.
Yeah.
And it's mostly mental health stuff, like you said?
Yeah. So I had a few. So I had the Shower for the Soul. And then I had Rinse, which was kind of like a Vice TV type of documentary, very hard hitting, a lot of music background. It was a 10-minute thing and a lot of news clips. And it just hit different topics very quickly. And then I had Fight or Flight, which was what I did about the misophonia and my battles with the misophonia, starting from the very beginning all the way to basically where I was when I was recording it. And then I'm a big wrestling fan. So there's one called Everything I've learned in life, I've learned from wrestling. So little wrestling stories I've learned in my 30-something years of watching wrestling, and how it impacted my life and how I turned those stories into life lessons.
Nice. You also wrote a book.
Yeah. So I just wrote a book, and it's called Recapturing My Mental Health Through Short Stories. So I was doing a lot of writing. I've always written since I was a kid. That's what I was doing with Geeks and Beats. I was doing their blog. And also did a lot of freelance writing, but I was also having fun with poetry around last year. And I was sending them to my mom and like people who would read them. And my mom's like, you should write a book, like an ebook about stories. And it's something that I thought of doing when I was a teenager, because so by the time I was 17, when I was thinking of writing this book, I almost died in the hospital from Sick Kids Hospital from a back surgery. My parents divorced, teenage battles of life, love, family, friend trauma, everything.
Mm-hmm.
So as a 17-year-old, you think, I've encountered everything in my life so far, and it's big, and everyone wants to read it. So I thought that everyone would want to read about my book. And I was a big Wonder Years fan, so, I thought I was just a little Fred Savage. And so I came up with Shower for the Soul, which later would become the name of my podcast. So I thought, well, maybe I should write a book, and I can't use Shower for the Soul. So I came up with this Recapturing My Mental Health Through Short Stories. And it's just basically what it is. It's just short stories talking about my scoliosis surgery in 1992 to being on the floor picking up cocaine, and having my friends support me on not drinking for 97 days, to a little bit about my misophonia situation and COVID and different stories like that. And it's, so it took basically around a year and a half to write, or a year to write.
I have my own book. It's a kid's book, and it took 4 years to write, so you did pretty good. Yeah. So did you have some substance abuse as well through those periods?
Yeah. So, you're a product of your environment. There was a lot of drugs around in my friend groups. So, and when you're depressed and you don't really feel like living for tomorrow, but not that bad where, you want to go home and off yourself, but you just felt like, oh, I don't care. I don't care anymore. And some white stuff comes around your way and it adds to the party and your drinking experience. Of course you would do it. So that's what I did. I was never one to buy it as much. Like, I was not that addicted. If it was around, it was around, and I'll just do it. It just happened that it was always around me.
So you mooched it off everyone.
I'd rather buy beer. I'd rather go to the bar and sit at a table and just talk all night rather than doing whatever. But
But if it was offered.
Well, yeah. That's what the washroom's for. So I basically did that a lot. I say from 2007 to like 2015. Through that time, I was on my floor in my bedroom, and I had to call my friend who was living in the UK at the time to say what's going on, and this is what I'm literally doing on the floor right now. I mean, I love the drug. It's just not something I'll do anymore. I think that's just age and just growing older and wiser. Mm-hmm. I'm much more of a pub guy. I would rather spend my night at the pub and just drink and do some shots.
Okay, that sounds good. So it's not like you had to go to treatment or anything like that. You just kind of grew out of it. You're like, okay, that was a fun phase. Time to
I did do some addiction counseling in 2015, but that was mainly for alcohol.
Okay, so now down to the misophonia stuff, because This is the stuff that I haven't talked to anyone about before, and I relate to it very much. So maybe explain a little bit what misophonia is.
So misophonia is undiagnosable disorder that has to do with sound. Most popular one is chewing, where people are afraid of, or just can't stand being around people chewing. And it's like a fight or flight reaction, where it's just not like, oh, it's very annoying, can you stop doing that? It's like the world's ending if I don't get away from you. Like, I need to leave, or else I'm going to get really mad and angry, and I'm just going to, throw stuff. For example, so there's repetitive sounds on the TV sometimes that I hate. And if I can't find my remote control for the mute button, even though those are like maybe 20 seconds, it feels like 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And the world's ending. And I need to find that remote control to press mute. It's like an anxiety attack times 2. It's crazy. And so for me, it's sounds. It started off when I was living in the basement of my mom's house, and she lived upstairs, and I would just hear her walking above me. And it was weird because it was never like I was there for a year and something, and suddenly something happened one day, and it just started getting on my nerves.
So it's not something that you've lived with forever. It was like a physical ailment. It appeared one day.
Yeah. No, what I was thinking about this also a while ago. I remember having these kind of reactions, but I just thought it was just annoying. So there was one time I was walking home from the mall, bags in both hands. Now, my sister is one of those, hello, send, how are you, send, can you talk to mom, send kind of texters. So hands full, my phone's vibrating, making sounds because of her texting. I know it's her. And I'm just like 5 feet away from my house. And I wanted to get home. But those 5 feet seemed like, again, 20 minutes. Because the sound was irritating me. She's also one of those repetitive doorbell ringers, mm-hmm. which also got on my nerves. So I never associated those two before with misophonia. I just knew that was just a thing that would get on my nerves. But the first time I found out about it and what really sparked it and sparked like me losing my job and everything was mom's footprints or footsteps. And it was bad because back then it was like, I don't know what's going on with Shane. And I didn't know what was happening. So she was worried about me, not knowing if I was going crazy or if I was on drugs or I was like, what's happening. And meanwhile, I'm like, what's going on with myself? Why am I acting like this?
And you actually lost your job?
Yeah, that was like a year later when I moved into this building I'm in now. But I originally lived in the basement. And there was a spa on top of me. Again, the footsteps and everything during the day. And I had to take a couple of mental health days. And I was taking some pills for my anxiety, which made me faint during a shift.
What was your job then?
I was doing some kind of customer service with an at-home company where I would be basically their receptionist. So all these different companies from the United States will call this one number, and you had to pretend to be their front desk person, and you like 100 calls a day. And that too, again, that was something else that I had to take care and really look at and see if, because there's different sounds that happens while you're wearing those headsets. And then just people being people and just as, customer service stuff.
Yeah.
It took a lot, and which was, again, something else that was weird because my whole life I've done customer service stuff. So suddenly it just started again to bug me and annoy me. And Yeah. So I had to stop working.
Hmm. Well, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. Um, if you talk to my little sister, well, she's 40, but she talks about this all the time. How I would like, as a kid, I would like flip out on her for eating, and it was like not because she was eating, but it was like because of her chewing. I'd be like, "Oh my god, get away from me!" Like siblings do, and she says I may have caused a complex in her about her chewing. Yeah, and it depends on the sound, right? Because I mean, lots of people find noises irritating, but if it's to the point you're like flipping out on people, it's a little different. Like I've had cars where I'm like pulling over and like ripping the car apart, finding what is that rubbing or squeaking sound in the back seat? Like what is doing that? Or you're like smashing, punching the dash because there's something in the dash that's you're
Yeah.
like, fucking
Yeah.
shut up. And you're like flipping
Yeah.
out.
And no one else can hear it.
Yeah. Or they like, oh yeah, and well now that you pointed out, I guess I can hear it. Was like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Why is that not consuming you? Like for me, that I've always been like that, but I've never heard of it just coming on like a cold to someone before.
Yeah, it seems like it was kind of like a cold because it just started one day. I had no idea what was happening, and I started to leave the house like maybe around 2 o'clock in the afternoon and just leave because I knew what my mom would be doing. So I knew around 2 o'clock she would finish work and then start doing everything in the living room area, which was right above me. So I would make sure that I could leave the house by that time. Um, when we still didn't know what was happening, I took a staycation in London. This was November 2019, so it was before COVID.
We might be confusing some people because you talked about living you had a friend in the UK, but you're living in London. So there is a London, Ontario in Canada.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
for those of you not in Canada, that's where Shane lives, not
Yes.
London, England. So anyway,
The way smaller one.
yes. Okay, sorry. Back to where you were.
So I had a staycation in London, Ontario, Canada, and just for me to get away. This is what I was writing my podcast at the time, doing a couple of episodes, and I just couldn't work at home. So I spent a week, and it was fine. I liked the freedom and stuff. But then again, when I got back home, it started again. And while there was rift between myself and my mom, throughout that whole time, we knew that it wasn't us, or wasn't, she knew it wasn't me. She knew that it's something that I have that we haven't found yet.
Right.
But for me, on the flip side, and I'm sure this is with other people with misophonia, when someone is chewing next to you at the dinner table, you don't blame the chewing, you blame them. So suddenly they're the ones who are doing it on purpose. And they're not the one who's being considerate to you. So at the beginning with this, I would tell my mom, hey, listen, your stomping is really bothering me. And to me, it was stomping and not stepping. Your stomping is really bothering me. Can you just kind of like try to do something with it? She's like, I can't. It's just like she was living her life. She shouldn't have, right? But to me, it was just like, well, she should have made that extra effort, and that's when you take it personally.
It's not just affecting, like it's not just irritating you. You take it personally, and it's like you're irrational with it.
Yeah.
I was just diagnosed with ADHD 6 or 7 months ago, and I know that having misophonia is a bit of a comorbidity with autism and ADHD. And have you been diagnosed with either of those?
Not with autism, but just I think around 5-6 months ago, I was diagnosed with a form of ADHD, which was more of in social aspects. So I could make coffee for myself here, fine. But if I had a group of people here, I would probably drop the coffee or make a mistake making the coffee, which explains kind of like when you create a test for yourself for school and you ace it and you can do it. But once you're in that study in the classroom and you're trying to do that test and everyone's around you, you can't. It's that. And totally explains why I always sucked at the exam. Yeah. So they did diagnose me with a form of ADHD.
I guess that kind of makes sense that, that those two are linked, but, or maybe you've always had misophonia. It's just, I don't know, maybe you've just noticed it more lately, or no? You're self-aware now, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. Like, because it's something you just live with, right? So every day I like, now that I'm living on the upper level of the same building and there's no one above me, all the triggering sounds are mainly from the TV or from YouTube, like annoying commercials, music.
Country music, man.
I know.
It's rough. I've had jobs where it's like the radio is on all day in the shop and it's country music, and it's like I found it hard to get out of bed to go to work. I might lose some listeners for that, but it's like, seriously, it's like, oh my God, I can't.
Shania Twain again.
Yeah, I can't do this anymore. I have to quit.
But yeah, it's stuff that I can control, and it's stuff that I can, like, literally press mute on. But yeah, and and then there's different sounds that you kind of like I pick up sometimes. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of irritating. But what I've started to do, actually, this past summer, I have no AC in this apartment. So I've had super fans on. I have like 5 fans in this apartment. And they all have their own little squeaky sound. Right?
I swear to God, you are like, every word you're saying is like in my head as you're saying it.
So, what I've been able to do, and I've been able to do with the squeaky sounds rather than the TV commercials and stuff, is associate the squeaky sounds. So, like, for me, the squeaky sounds remind me of going to Vegas and staying in a hotel, like at MGM or Caesars. You know how their AC used to be squeaky? Like, associating those sounds with these sounds. So I'm kind of connecting good times with the fans. So I'm not thinking of them as annoying sounds. I'm thinking of them as, I'm in Vegas and I'm at Caesar's Palace in a nice suite, and we're going to go swimming soon.
I'll have to try that. Yeah, man. Like, there's times in the middle of the night I'm like shaking my fan because it's
yeah.
And my wife's like, "What are you doing?" Like, I cannot live in this room like this. Well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, same.
So are these just coping skills you've kind of come up with on your own, or are you talking to a professional about it? Or
I did talk to a couple of professionals since this whole thing happened. And I think they mentioned something about it. It's just something I came up with myself, of trying to cope with the fan sounds, because I knew I had to live with them for the rest of the summer. But yeah, I mean, it's like I've had most misophonia for the past 3 years now. So I'm starting to kind of understand how to cope with it, and little side hustles I could do to avoid the fight or flight type of reactions, which I haven't had in a while. So
good. Yeah. The chewing one is tough because it's like, it's not like you can hit mute on someone chewing, but over the years I've just like accepted that, it's me, it's not them, it's temporary. The mew will be over soon. But actually, I have a friend who is a waitress, and we were talking about misophonia one night, and she's like, "Yeah, it's the chewing." I'm like, "How can you do it?" She's like, "Well, I'm not standing next to them while they're eating, right?" Yeah.
And it just gives her more excuse to stay busy and walk around and stuff. So she's never really hitting a table and spending enough time to hear them chew, if that makes sense.
It's definitely affected relationships in my life. I had a coworker that I was close with, and he would do this weird noise with his mouth once in a while. It was like I couldn't have coffee with him anymore. It was like I had to leave the room, and it was like, no, I can't. Yeah. And in high school, it was chewing gum. There was a guy that would sit behind me, and it was like the entire class. So it wasn't like a meal where it was like, there's a bit of chewing and then not. It was just like this constant behind me, and it was like,
oh yeah.
fuck.
Yeah.
How about kissing sounds on TV?
I don't know.
Huh.
Yeah, I know.
Actually, you know what? I wouldn't even notice, but my wife watches a lot of like The Bachelor and all these kind of dating reality shows. So it's just been the last while where people are like kissing on reality shows, where it's like, oh my God, that's so.
Well, there's the beeping when like Jersey Shore. I love Jersey Shore, and I've been watching the new season, which is amazing. Sam is back, which is cool. But the beeps when they swear a lot and they have to do the beeps.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of annoying. Or yelling, just dumb yelling, like the girls from Jersey Shore. Sometimes I have to turn that on.
My wife doesn't watch that, but she watches a lot of Real Housewife of different cities, and she'll watch it in the bedroom. But even from the bedroom, I can hear beep 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 like through the wall. I'm like, oh my God. Huh. That's interesting. So is like having to quit a job the biggest setback, I guess, misophonia has caused you?
I think so. Yeah. There was like, now I have to tread very carefully of what I take and what I do. I was just doing market research with a company I worked with 20 years ago. Then I took a really long lunch break and came back to them, and that was fine because it's not like every call, and you're kind of controlling the call volume. So it was the incoming calls that were really annoying me. And you don't really get a lot of dumb people when you do market research, because it's just your opinion and yes or no, strongly agree, So yeah, so I was able to do that. Ideally, I would love to do I just like to do some writing, for work and stuff like that. But like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's everything I do. I'm going to encounter some type of misophonia, some triggers. So I just have to, prepare myself. Just kind of like depression. You wake up every morning, you're like, okay, well, is it going to hit me today or not?
Yeah.
And just like come prepared.
Have you ever heard of synesthesia?
No.
I think I'm saying that right. It's where some people, they can hear a name or they'll see music in color, and it's also a very common thing with, well, I shouldn't say very common, but it's more common with like ADHD and autism than neurotypical people. But yeah, there's a lot of things with the senses that people neurodivergent people kind of go through. Yeah, do you have sensitivities with fabrics or anything like that, like with touch or light or anything else?
Oh no, those are fine. All my other senses are pretty good. It's just the sounds. What I read over the weekend, which is pretty cool, is that Walmart is going to start doing sensory hours for those with autism. So they're going to have dimmer lights and quieter music just for people who can't shop in a regular shopping hours with, full blast music and full blast lights and everything.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I used to work in theater, and we would have certain performances that were for people with autism and people that couldn't take too much. What do you call it? I can't think of the word. Doesn't matter.
It's kind of like
sensory overload kind of stuff.
Yeah. So it's kind of like not Good Will Hunting, Mr. Holland's Opus. What he did for his son.
Right. Yeah. Which was cool, but also working in theater was a nightmare for me because while like I used to be the carpenter, I build sets and stuff, and I'd be in my shop working, and like all day long, over and over and over and over and over again, they're rehearsing in the theater, which I can hear from my shop, the same song from like Little Mermaid, like 30 times a day. And it's like,
yeah,
fuck. Like it was like that country music thing again, but it was like, oh my God. If I hear that song over time, I'm going to lose it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I used to work, I worked from home with Rogers cell phone customer service and tech. And they still have the same holding music. And I always told them, like, dude, you guys own how many radio stations? Can't you just put in like CHFI or 680 News or, and instead of having literally the same song played over and over again for your hold music? It's annoying.
You're a communications company, for Christ's sake.
They're like the Rogers like the Comcast of Canada.
And yeah, I've talked to a couple people from London on the podcast, actually. What's with that? You all talking? You're like, you got to get on this podcast.
I don't know. I would love to. I'd love to talk to other people. Defeat Depression has a pretty good backing. This year I was the first. I was the chair for this past year's run, last in May, at Victoria Park, which is like our town square.
I think every city has a Victoria Park.
Yeah, and then in Toronto has Victoria Park Avenue.
Oh yeah, Regina has Victoria Park.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you know that, but I'm in Saskatchewan.
But yeah. So yeah, I know there's a lot of backing. I just haven't really met a lot of other people.
Yeah, there's a young lady who was in a car accident and she had to learn how to walk and all this stuff that I talked to from London. And she actually lost a friend in the car accident too. She was a really great guest.
Oh wow.
Anyway, I told you I go off track once in a while. But the thing about the thing about misophonia is it does affect your mental health. Like it's not just any of these kind of sensory kind of issues affect mental health. It's like trying to work all day while someone's jabbing a needle in your eye.
Exactly.
And it's like, I don't know how else to explain it.
It's well, first, before I knew it was misophonia, I thought I was going crazy, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. So that was kind of like ego deflator. But yeah, it's kind of upsetting to go through it because you're kind of like, what's happening with me and why am I like this? And then you're going, when I wake up in the morning, how, like, for example, when I was living in the basement, I was always on guard. So I don't know how many appointments she would have, but sometimes when she didn't even have appointments, she would be in there cleaning. So I would wake up and have her there at 9:00, and I'm hearing her footsteps. So I put on my headphones, and then I kind of like, okay, is that it for the day? And you're kind of like, I wasn't living my life fully because for the rest of the day, I was kind of like, what's she going to do now? And this is during lockdown. So it's not like I really could have gone anywhere. So, you're trying to live your life and then something else happens. She's up there again. And you're like, okay, how long is this going to be? And it ends up being like 20 minutes and you're already going, buck wild, and you're debating if leaving the house and going for a walk or something like that. So yeah, it really fucks with your life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's constantly fight or flight and the constant anticipation of like, oh God, I know it's coming and there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm sure I don't have it as bad as some people, but still it's... So are you self-diagnosed? Like, did you kind of just put your symptoms into Google and...
At first I did. And then I went to the doctor, and my doctor, that's when she said she couldn't really diagnose me because they don't recognize misophonia as anything. And that's when they were then she did some images of my head, and she found atrophy on the front part of my head. And that's when she recommended to me recommended me to the head doctor, who was the one who diagnosed me with ADHD. But yeah, so then there's a center here called Daya Counseling, and I saw two of the counselors, and they both said, "Yeah, you do have misophonia, and this is really what's happening." So they gave, I forgot the name of the pills, but they're really, really heavy anxiety pills. Where, like, when you're I don't know if you ever did this, but when you're in a big high, you feel like your body's way too heavy, and like if you're stepping up on the stairs, your footsteps feel really heavy, and that's the kind of high I was with just half one of those pills. I mean, I've done coke, I've done a lot of other stuff, shrooms. This was like the biggest trip ever, and I hated it.
Oh.
And I said, no, man, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to just smoke my weed, and be peaceful and take my gummies and, watch some wrestling. But
So you're self-prescribed.
yes. So yeah, like I couldn't take the hard stuff.
So misophonia isn't in the DSM-5, which is like the book of psychology and psychiatrists use for diagnoses.
No.
Interesting. But yet you had like 3 different professionals recognize it.
They recognize it, but they can't diagnose it. So they can't prescribe anything for it. They can prescribe something for what they think misophonia is a part of, which is ADHD, autism.
Right. So I guess that kind of makes sense then. If it's more of a symptom of something bigger, then I guess it isn't technically its own thing. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. I'm just, as we're talking, I'm just thinking of all the annoying noises that drive me nuts. And it's like, I'm sitting here, like, I'm getting triggered. I'm like on edge. I'm like, I should have known. It's that time again for that Some Bunny special, a segment where we chat about who cooperated in our mental health journey and helped fill our emotional tanks. Brought to you by Co-op, which is a very Western Canadian business. I don't know if London, Ontario has co-ops, but who would you like to give a shout out for when you, through life, needed someone?
Ooh.
Macho Man Randy Savage.
How do you know? No, Randy is my favorite wrestler of all time.
Put into a Slim Jim. You're going nowhere.
I would say, I guess, in wrestling terms, I was, I guess I've been beating up on my mom for this whole podcast. I guess I could put her over. So, yeah, I guess my mom, she's helped me. She's always been there. And we went to battle, but at the end of the day, I knew she loved me and she was always there to support me and help me through everything and understood where I was at. And while it took a few times for me to say, no, I don't want to go out today, leave me in the dark in my bed, she finally clicks in and says, yeah, maybe he does want to sleep all day and be in the dark. But, deep inside, I know that whatever she did to try to get me up was all from love. And I might have thought of it otherwise. I know I'm ahead right now, so I'll shut up. And get her back into the bottom. But I guess I would say my mom.
Oh, nice. Well, and I mean, she let you stay in her basement, and she's the one that got writing into your head.
Exactly. Yep, she's the one who inspired the book.
Right. Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, that's generally how family is. It's like you want to kill them or you love them unconditionally and want to praise them.
Right on. Exactly.
Do you still go through depression and anxiety, or was that more of
all the time? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. It's not like you're cured now.
Far from it.
Well, to be honest with you, for me, I mean, I consider that a symptom of my ADHD. Are you on meds for your ADHD now?
No, I know. I just those. I've had bad experiences with depression drugs or mental health drugs, however you want to call them. They just don't work.
Well,
So
the ADHD meds are different than like anti-anxiety and antidepressive meds. They're actually, well, they're a bit like cocaine, actually.
oh yeah.
They're a stimulant. So I don't know. You might like it. I just saw my doctor again just about an hour. Well, yeah, this morning we had to reschedule because I had to have a doctor's appointment, and he's actually upping mine. So I'll be on the maximum dosage of legal stimulant you can have, and which is funny because when I was kind of in my addiction times, a stimulant like that did not interest me at all. So I'm not trying to abuse them or talk my doctor into giving me more. It's just what I need, I guess, to get me focused and whatever. So,
well, it's like weed. I mean, we all started doing it in the park and, behind your parents' back. And now 30 years later, we're doing it right in front of them. And your parents are now interested in saying, hey, how can I have these gummies for my back? Like, it's weird.
Yeah. I haven't, well, I'm clean. I've been sober for almost 7 years now, but when I was using marijuana, I mean, that was my jam.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
My mouth still waters when I think about it, but
yeah.
Be sure to subscribe and to like this video. You can listen on Apple Podcast and Spotify. This is Todd Rennebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Keep watching for more interviews with incredible people telling their stories of resilience and adversity with mental health and mental illness.